Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to another Cars and Coffee. And if you're a car guy, want to know more about your car and performance, you are in the right spot. This morning's subjects are going to talk about wheel hop and IRS and things you can do about it, how to measure ride height and when to measure ride height and why it's so important, and then benefits of cold air kits for picking up performance. And of course, we've got a couple of quick hitter questions from the Speed Therapy Society people. And if you got any questions, please send them in. I mean, that's what I'm here for, to answer your questions. And I'll, again, towards the end of the hour, I'll be answering some questions that come in. Let's see. Carrie isn't here today, but of course, she left me my list with all these little markings on it so I don't forget things. Oh, by the way, I'm Kenny Brown. And over the next hour or so, I'm going to share with you some of my experience of over 40 years of professional motorsports and building just top-notch street cars, track cars, and championship-winning race cars. And that's the knowledge, I like sharing with people, and more about answering your questions, because I talk about what you want to learn about. So everything we're going to talk about today came from either the Speed Therapy Society or Speed Therapy Academy. If you're not a member of the Speed Therapy Society, it's a private Facebook group. I strongly recommend that you join because there's a lot of good people. That's where my questions come from. And there's so much camaraderie. Wake up. There's so much this is 10 o'clock. It's an hour earlier, so I'm having trouble adjusting. There's a lot of camaraderie, some good posts, lots of car pictures and people talking. So it's a really, really cool group. Let's see, if you're watching us on YouTube, we got my YouTube channel. Hold on, I got to find my notes from Carrie on the new YouTube channel. Okay, there we go. If you're watching on YouTube and you haven't subscribed yet, hit the big red button. And if you want to be notified of Cars and Coffee Live, there's a little bell. Hit the little bell. And all our Facebook fans, we love our Facebook fans. Be sure to click the like button. And if you're new to us, we like all the thumbs coming up, and then also we are supposed to have wrenches that kind of come up that float up, but they get hot and melted, so they kind of look like hearts. So anyway, those are actually wrenches. So be sure to send some of those because that helps to spread the word. Now, something cool that a few people are doing, they're doing watch parties on Facebook, and you're easy to start a watch party. Just invite some of your friends. In fact, invite some of your friends no matter what, because if you think they could gain some value of the things we talk about, we'd love to have them. Besides, we'll have more questions. So let's see. We want to start off today. Oh, art. I forgot the art. Last week we had Dan Gurney and his All-American Eagle at Spa, the only American car with an American driver that won a Formula One race. But this weekend is Le Mans. So what I decided to do, I went back and pulled out another Dan Gurney picture. Now this is Dan Gurney at Le Mans 1965. And what's kind of cool about it is you can actually see he's holding his hand up to shield from the sun. You can see his gloves and his watch. And it's pretty cool. It's one of my favorite pictures. And I can tell you his sunset. Real simple reason is you can see it still has the, it's kind of cool. I can point like this. It still has the covers on the headlights and the driving lights. And as soon as it goes dark or at dusk, they'll peel them off. That way they don't have bugs and dirt and oil all over the headlights when they start in the night. So they start out with clear lights. So in honor of Le Mans, we have Dan Gurney up this morning. Okay, so now let's talk about wheel hop and IRS. I don't think I have to describe what wheel hop is. Anybody that's got an IRS car that hasn't made any modifications to it know exactly what wheel hop is. You pop the clutch, you want to get into it, and all of a sudden your wheels start banging like crazy. So what really causes that? Well, it's caused by, the cars we turn into performance cars are actually street cars to start with, and they're built for comfort and mileage and all the things that we don't really care about. We want performance. Well, the problem is when you try to accelerate really hard, the tire will grab, and as it grabs, it'll kind of like twist everything along the way, all the way up to the differential, because everything's mounted in rubber. but they'll only twist to a certain point, and they've got to release. So as they release, that starts the wheel hop. And once that wheel hop starts, I mean, there's not enough shock absorber or spring to get control of that hopping. And what happens is you got a lot of mass. I mean, the lower control arms they weigh a ton. The upper control arms are cast iron or steel. So once you get all that mass in motion, you really need to do something to control it. So we started doing IRS cars in '99. And when they came out with the 99 Cobra, kind of like the Mustang world was in just a tizzy, because they were mostly drag versions with live axles, and they just could not get their heads around this whole IRS thing. But for me, it was no big deal, because back in the 70s, I was doing open wheel formula cars, Fords, Atlantic, Super Vs, some sports cars for the IRS. So the whole IRS thing was not new to me. I'd worked with it before. I knew all about it. I knew how it worked. So we just started working with IRS, and I think we've come up with some really good solutions to make the IRS handle like nothing else. And that's what we're all about here is solutions. We take a problem and we'll come up with a solution. So the thing is, I think we're the only people in the aftermarket that really support IRS Cobras. We've got a complete suspension, chassis, rear suspension, front suspension. So we were still supporting 99 to 04 Cobras. So what do we do to stop the wheel hop? Well, we address it in a couple of different phases. And when people come to us and they want to upgrade their IRS, we'll start with our phase one solution is to kind of get the differential under control. So what we do, we replace the factory forward brace on the differential with this, which is really solid. If you look under a 99 to 04 IRS car, it's got like a hollow tube that's kind of curved, and they deflect. This is solid; it doesn't deflect. The other thing we do to take some of the bounce out of the differential is we switch over to these aluminum forward diff bushings. And they do two purposes. One, they turn the rubber bushing into a solid bushing. And secondly, you can see all the little fins. Well, that kind of acts like a little bit of a heat sink. I mean, it's not going to take all the heat out of the differential, but it will take some. And by doing this, it's like we originally designed this to go the other way so that all these washers are on the top. But what we found is that by putting on the bottom and putting the snout of the differential up, we increase the pinion angle. And the short story is back, I think, 2000, 2001, something like that. We had a customer come in that had been to the Ford dealer multiple times with driveline vibrations. And they had replaced drive shafts and just about everything, and the vibration was still there. We installed one of these, increased the pinion angle, vibration gone. So that's why in all the cars that we build, we put the pinion angle up to help with the vibration. So that's the front of the differential. And the third piece of our stage one is rear steer kit. And this replaces the factory tie rod in the back. And if you notice, there's like offset bushings. What happens, what I found out, we were testing it at Road Atlanta with Ford Racing with the FR500s. This is like 2003 maybe. The FR500, that was their concept car with a double wishbone front and IRS rear. And I noticed that the last turn before the straightaway at Road Atlanta, and we're really going around it, got to a certain point, and the back would just kind of get a little happy. And then also going up underneath the tunnel, heading down the hill, it's like you got a little happy there, which is not the place for a car to get happy. So I went back and I did pulled my geometry program up, put all the points in, and what I discovered is once the car got to a certain degree of roll, both tires would turn the wrong way. That's why the back of the car got loose. So the solution is to try to help the roll steer by bringing the inner pickup point down. We've had this concept for a long time. I know it's been copied by a number of people, but they like put a front end bump steer kit on the outside, and they call it rear bump steer. Well, it's the real problem with the back of the car is roll steer, not bump steer. So that's kind of like our phase one, and that helps some. I mean, that does help some. But you still got the problem of all this mass, the big heavy control arms, soft springs, weak shocks. So in our phase 2, what we do is we replace the lower control arm, which is really huge and heavy, with our tubular. Now, this is not a light piece. I mean, this has some mass to it because we want strength. But you can see there's a double triangulation on the control arm, and the one triangulation goes straight to where the shock mounts. And of course, we go to urethane bushings and a coilover shock. We convert to a coilover shock for the simple reason I use coilovers in almost everything. And with a coilover shock, you have total control of your spring rate. You got control of your ride height. And that's what I like, because when we set up shocks for people, somebody will come with shock. I'll talk to them. I'll figure out what they're going to do with it, and I will custom select spring rates just for their application. And then I'll do a pre-adjustment on the shock, and they'll get a sheet and make the shock that way. But by taking the mass out of the lower control arm and adding a shock absorber that has my exclusive valving in it, we went to Strange, and we were up in Chicago. And because we were using Coney's, but their turnaround time was terrible. And sometimes we have to wait 6-8 weeks for shocks. So we went to Strange, and I took my shock book. People have been with us for a while. See my notebook full of shock dynos. And I said, I went to Dimitri, who does the shock. I said, can you kind of build a shock like this? He said, sure. So they've been building our rear shocks ever since in both single adjustable and double adjustable. For 95% of the applications, single adjustable is just fine. But by doing that, I can control the spring rate. I can put a decent spring rate in the back, match to whatever the spring rate is in the front. Plus, we got a shock that's got real control. So by taking the mass out, taking the rubber bushings out with urethane, tightening up the front of the differential, and going to a coilover with a good spring rate and proper valving, I mean, the 90% of the wheel hop goes away. And then our next phase is, because we do this in 4 phases, our next phase is to replace the upper control arms. If you've ever seen the upper control arms, I mean, they're like cast iron. They are heavy. So we have a tubular one that's considerably lighter, and it's a pretty unique design. As you can see, it's not designed like the other control arms because this was done in a computer with FAE analysis, finite element analysis, for what was going to be the strongest solution. And you won't see another control arm like that. In fact, most of our parts, you won't see others like that. And of course, we go to urethane bushing. That takes a lot of weight out. Between the lower control arm, the shock, the spring, and the upper control arm, we take, I can't remember, 42, 44 pounds off the back, which is a lot. I mean, that's a lot of mass, a lot of moving mass that you eliminate, which makes the suspension react a lot faster. And the 4th phase is we actually take the carrier and we change all the pickup points for the suspension. And all the suspension pickup points get changed. We add some anti-squat to it. It's really hard to get anti-squat into an IRS, but we put in about as much as we can, and we change everything. I mean, the camber gains changed, the roll centers changed. We have a really nice envelope for the roll center. I mean, it's just that's the whole package, and that complete package just works like crazy. And that's supposed to lead into we've had a lot of inquiries of people on SN95 and IRS. So not next week, but the week after. For Cars and Coffee, I'm going to do a workshop on the 99 to 04 Cobras, and I'm going to go through the whole build process. I wrote an article a number of years ago, 93, I think 94, 03 or 04, about how I built my CSR OT cars. That's Club Sport Racer dash open track, and I'm going to go through the whole process and my thought process and what solutions I came up with to make it a better track car. And so I'm going to go through the whole thing because I had a lot of people ask about that. So if any of your friends with IRS cars, even if Fox is bolted in an IRS, I think it'd be worth listening to, because it's like I say, it's going to be a workshop specifically on SN95, 99 to 04 Cobras, and anybody else that's stuck a Cobra IRS into their car. So that's kind of how we deal with my solution to fixing the wheel hop in the IRS cars. I mean, if you're on a limited budget, at least get some better springs and some better shock absorbers. you need to try to control, try to get at least the front stabilizing kit, stage 1, and some better shocks and springs. You have to have more control, because once that mass gets going, if you don't have enough shock, it's not going to slow it down. It's going to keep bouncing. And that's the shock absorber's job, is to control the oscillation between tire, wheel, spring, and chassis. And if you don't have enough shock, it's going to just keep bouncing. I'm sure you've seen a car go down the road. It's kind of doing this bouncy thing with the shock's more out. Well, sort of the same principle, except that they're not worn out. They just don't have enough valving to control it. So that's a little bit on IRS cars. And if you've got any questions, be sure to send them in. I'll answer them later. Okay, what else are we going to talk about this morning? Oh, ride height. How to measure ride height. Ride height is always kind of an interesting thing. Coffee time. I know for like sanctioning bodies, they have like a minimum ride height, which is the lowest part of the car. Is like typically 3.5 inches. It's probably the lowest 4 inches, 3.5. And you crawl underneath the car to measure ride height. Well, a lot of people think that's the way you're supposed to measure ride height. But, I got a far simpler way. The way I do ride height is we actually take a tape measure and go from the ground through the center of the wheel to the lip of the fender. That's kind of a constant. And so that's what we do. We go from the ground to the lip of the fender, and that's how we measure ride height. We record it. And why is that important? Well, if you go to change your springs, whether it's coilover or not, it's best if you know what your ride height was before you made a change. Then you know what it's like after you made a change. And if you've got like doing a coilover and you want to change the ride height, at least you've got a template on where you started and where you want to be. My other little kind of tip for setting ride height is take a look at the tires. You look at the diameter of the tires, and I like the fender lip to be maybe 2 fingers above the tire to the fender lip, maybe 1.5 inches. If you've got a lot of the tires we use are like 20, 26, 27 inches. So, we're looking at ride height at 27 and a quarter to 27.5. So that's the kind of the easy way. And like I say, you always want to record it before and after, because that's information you need. Okay, moving right along. We are going to talk about, going down my list, cold air kits. Cold air kits, essentially what they do is they eliminate the factory air filter and like the snorkus that goes to the throttle body with something that's bigger and more efficient, so that increases airflow. And the more air you get in and out of an engine, the more power you make. That's why, you want to make some power, just concentrate the top part of the motor. The heads, the cams, intake, and exhaust. That's going to get you, that's where the power is. The bottom end is just, that kind of just holds the whole thing together. Well, you have a lot of cubic inches, though, that's what builds torque. But intake and exhaust are for like the Coyote cars. All we really do is put a cold air intake on, headers and exhaust, do a good tune-up on it, and we make just a lot of power. You don't have to go into the engine, and if you do the suspension along with that, then you got a car that's wicked fast. So what I had this morning for show and tell is JLT was nice enough to send us a cold air kit for S550 Mustang. I've been using JLT cold air kits for don't know how many years, but it's one of the major players in the cold air market, and I think they're about the best. They've got great products, they got great service, and I highly recommend them. Boy, this starting out early is killing me. I highly recommend JLTs. Like I say, we've been using them for years on my, the Boss cars, the Boss S197 cars, just with JLT cold air and headers, exhaust. We're putting about anywhere from 425 to 440 to the ground, which is like close to 500 crank horsepower. And in the newer 550 cars, we can go way over 500 horsepower just with intake and exhaust. So, those are easy power improvers without having to dig in and change the whole motor. So I want to show you, this is really cool. This is for the 550 cars, and it's going to blow your mind. remember I said, you got your little air snorkus. The factory one is maybe about that big, and it kind of goes through this little box and a stock air filter into the throttle body. Get a load of this. Kaboom! Now, how much air do you think you can get through that baby? And plus, it's got super high efficient air filter, and I guess they've got options to have either blue or paper air filters, but this is kind of the most popular. And if you're in climates like where there's a lot of water or dust, they also have like a pre-filter socket you can go over it to protect it. But just think how much air you can get through this into your throttle body. And also changing throttle bodies in some cars makes an improvement. So if you get more air in and more air out. And this, like I say now, the mass air, the airflow bolts right into there. And because this is so much bigger than the factory, you really need to get a tune. Highly recommend to get a tune. And the SCT tuners actually have a tune for the JLT built right into them. So you don't have to go to a tuning shop. You just have to get a tuner, and the tune's right in there. Just plug it in. And here's the other part. That's cool, but it gets cooler. The factory air box is kind of like this. So this is like the air box they got for the 550 cars. Now look at the volume they've got in there. I mean, that's a lot more volume than what's in the factory car. And what happens is the snorkus and the air fit right in here in the air filter, and then you've got this nice little block that goes on top to block it off, and then this goes up against the hood, so it kind of blocks it off. But then they also, I think you see this really well, they also just hook right up to the factory ram air. So you still use the factory ram air system, but they also have this extra space here because inadvertently, I mean, you're going to suck a lot. If you got your foot way into it, you're going to suck a lot of air. So this is pretty cool. I mean, like I say, we've been using JLT for a long time. You just use your imagination how much more air can get through this system into your car. And I say JLT headers, you're going to pick up. Well, they say just with the air, the intake and a decent tune, you're going to pick up 25, 30 horsepower, just like that. Boom. And it doesn't seem like a lot, but you start driving, it does seem like a lot. And then you add some headers, there's maybe another 20, 25 horsepower. So that's, cold air kits. If you don't have one, I strongly recommend you get one. There's a lot of brands out there. Like I say, we've been using JLTs for years, and I'm really sold on them. It's a great product. So we're actually making a really good time today. What else is on the list? Okay. Now, Carrie's not here today, but she left me my list, and Bridget's filling in for her. No, here's where she comes up with a sign. If you're just joining us, I'm Kenny Brown. This is Cars and Coffee, where I spend an hour or so sharing my extensive knowledge on cars, performance, that all came out of professional motorsports. Oh, and if you're new to us, back there, that's my trusty toolbox. I mean, that's what makes me different from a lot of other guys in the aftermarket. I mean, I actually made my living out of my toolbox for a lot of years. In fact, that toolbox over the last 40 years, that toolbox and I have been to just every major racetrack in North America. So, I mean, that's why I still have it. I mean, I can't give it up.
One question from American Idol. He says, any benefit to the 3.7 V6 from JLT intake?
Any benefit to the V6? Sure. Any car, if you can free up the air coming into any car, you're going to pick up some power, performance, and even some gas mileage. So yeah, no matter what the car, if it's got a factory air intake, you can improve it with I have to check and see if JLT has one for the V6, but if they do, yeah, it'd be good, and we can get it for you if you want. Okay, I made it through it if you're just joining us, and I did that without Carrie having to hold up her sign this week, and reminding everybody we're at the new time, 10 Eastern time. In Speed Therapy Academy this week, we had kind of a really good Speed Therapy Academy. The subject was plumbing and hardware. And we went through all the AN, all the plumbing things and oil coolers and transmission coolers. And we had a special guest in our master class, Eric from BAT, British American Transport, for something like that. Anyway, they're the importer for a lot of oil coolers and lines. And we had our supplier for our diff coolers and air equip lines here in Indianapolis closed up. I mean, the guy just decided to retire. So we've reestablished a relationship with VAT down in Florida. And they're now our supplier for all our air equip and our oil coolers. Anyway, he gave a really nice presentation. I mean, every time we have one of these guys come on, I learn things. And so that was our learning. Our immersion session was plumbing and hardware, and then our master class was with Eric. And then we did something unusual for Thursday nights. We usually have we put somebody in the driver's seat and try to solve a problem. Well, this week, because we're taking a week off next week, it's got a mid-semester break. We had bench racing. It was really cool. I mean, we just had everybody talking about racing stuff. So that's something new that we did in the academy. But if we do the academy again, we're going to do more of that. So, okay, I got the Speed Therapy Academy. I got wheel hop. I got the ride height. I got cold air. And we're way ahead of schedule. I don't know how I did that. Here's another note. Sign up for the newsletter to receive notifications on events and the Facebook page. Okay. I think we got through absolutely everything. Oh, we got the questions. I got a couple of questions to answer. Christopher wanted to know regarding the MT82 transmission oil leaks and reliability on track. I have really not heard much about oil leaks, although I have heard about a lot of transmission failures on both the Coyote S197s and the 550 cars, which is why everybody switches over to the Magnum XL. It's like a real transmission. It's a real 6-speed. I haven't heard of leaking, but I've heard of failures. If it's leaking, you need to clean it off really good and then try to trace down and see where the leak is. If you can identify the leak, you might be able to figure out why it's leaking. But you don't want it to leak too much. I mean, that's not a good thing. So, it's trace it down, try to figure out where it's leaking, and try to fix it. It could be just a loose bolt. You never know. Okay, and then Brian, whose last name I'm not even going to try. It's got a whole lot of consonants in it, and I don't do well with those. Brian wanted to know the best rim and tire for someone on a really tight budget. Currently has a stock 19.9 wheels, not much option in this rim size, and I'm not sure if I would see a performance increase with something like 19 by 10 inch wheel, with something like a 285. And he also said he would love to try R compound tires, but the price doesn't seem to justify the return in the short life. Well, I'm going to work backwards from the R-type tires. I strongly would recommend against that. Unless you've got a chassis that's set up with some real spring rate, the sticky R-type tires are not the way to go. And the reason for that is that you've got, like with street tires and a stock suspension, going around a corner, you've got a certain amount of lean on the tires, and the tire will get to its maximum, the slip angle. And at that point, the car will stop leaning and you go around the corner. Well, you put a super sticky tire on there, and going around the corner, the tires aren't going to slip, it's going to stick, but the car is going to keep rolling over. And the Mustangs have a positive roll suspension, so the more the suspension rolls, the more positive it goes. So, I mean, what's going to happen is, first of all, that you're going to be unstable. Secondly, you could be chewing up the outside of the tires. I've seen a number of people that have gone to like a sticky tire, R-type or slick with stock suspension, and three things happen. They either wear the outside of the tire out, or they wear through the outside of the tire, or they run themselves off track. So I highly recommend against it, because here's the whole spring thing. Stock Mustang, like S195, S550, S197, S550, the front spring rate is in the 130 to 150 range, let's say. And The best aftermarket springs you can get are only 250 or 220. The most I've seen is 225. Well, because we use coilovers and adjustable spring rates for touring, we go to a 350 spring. Street performance is 450. Intermediate track on street tires is like 500, 550, and advanced track on sticky tires is 650. And if you think that's a lot for like slicks, for real slicks, Pirelli slicks, like we use in World Challenge, like on my Paul's car, we're using like race shocks and 850 to 1,000-pound springs. So when you put it, the stickier the tire is, the more spring rate you need. So, I strongly recommend, going to R-type tires or super sticky tires with a stock suspension. I mean, it's a waste of money. I mean, you're going to tear up your tire and you could just run yourself off the track, which is not good. But getting back to the original part of the story, you've got a 19 by 9. Okay, you've got a 19 by 9. So I'm guessing you've got a 255 45 or 255 50 tire on that. Well, if you look on the tire charts, you can actually, on 1999, the widest tire you can get is a 275, either 275 45 or 275 40. It's 275 35, 275 40. And that's like 2 sizes up without having to change wheels. And that's a nice improvement. If you go to wheels, 19 by 10 is kind of like our most favorite street setup with a 285 35. But that takes an investment, and I definitely stay away from 18-inch wheels. 18-inch wheels in our program are for racing or older cars like SN95 and Fox. We use 18s, but for the newer cars, it's just 19s. 18s we only use for 18s for racing in series that require an 18-inch wheel. But for me, 18s are for race tires. 19s are for track and street, and 20s are just for show because they weigh too much and they don't have any sidewall. And Mustangs, because of the way they kind of need sidewall for forward grip mostly. That's why we went to a really tall tire. On World Challenge, when they first brought Pirelli slicks in, the SCCA mandated like a 305 645, which is a pretty short tire. And the Pirelli went nuts. They said, no, the car is too heavy. So they ended up going to a 305 680, which is like a 27-inch tall tire, which is about what they needed. So that's why I don't like 20s. I mean, they're a show wheel. But anyway, getting back to this, you can get a 275 on there, and if you really want some performance, just upgrade the suspension. At the very least, springs and shocks. If it's the S197. We've got a great suspension package that if you go into Speed Therapy Society, you have people telling everybody else what a great suspension we've got for 197s, the rear grip kit, the front grip kit, and multiple coilover spring and shock packages. For the 550 cars, I mean, they're pretty good right out of the box, but their springs and shocks are weak. So we've got some great upgrade springs and shock packages for the 550 cars. Also, wheel hop in the 550s. We haven't gotten really deep into that yet because we've been too busy with other things, but just by going to a better spring and shock, that seems to help. And also we have a kit that locks down the carrier. It's like these little plates that go into the mounting to support the rubber bushings. So if you lock the back down and get a better spring and shock combo, you're gonna take a lot of the wheel hop away. I mean, the other thing is, wheel hop typically comes from hard starts and in drag racing. Man, we just don't do drag racing with IRS. IRS is not meant to be a drag race suspension, even though people do it. It's just not meant for drag racing. You want to go drag racing, get a live axle. But people do it. We increased the anti-squat, not so much for wheel hop, but for grip to get traction off a corner. If we add anti-squat, I mean, we're getting more bite after we get back to the throttle. Before my suspensions, you get the throttle before the apex, so you're pretty much flat out full throttle by the time your corner exit. So anyway, that's on the 550s. We've got great spring shock packages that help that, and of course lock down the IRS carrier. But anyway, so yeah, I would say if you can get some like Michelin, the Pilot Sport 4S is a great street tire you can take to the track. There's a lot of performance in that. Would you see some improvement with a 19 by 10 with 285? Yeah, you would, but you'd actually see more improvement with 275 and a better suspension. Because real, performance handling comes from the suspension. That's just where it is. So those are the two questions that came out of Speed Therapy Society. And if, like I say, if you're not a member, please join. No, there's no coming up. I also do one-on-one 15-minute consults. If you got a question that's more than something I can ask in a couple of minutes, then schedule for a 15-minute consult. And I think I do them on Mondays and Wednesdays. I forget. You have to call and check with Carrie because she's the one that schedules them for them. But we have I've helped a lot of people, at least when I can. Sometimes I get questions I just can't answer. I can't answer them. Nope, can't answer it. But this is what I know. So I covered everything. I even squeezed in the 15-minute consults without Carrie having to tell me. But then I had a clue. I guess that's my Carrie clue right on the screen. Okay, well, I kind of got run through everything this morning. Have we got any questions that have come in?
We talked a little bit about our social medias, YouTube, Instagram.
Okay, I'm supposed to talk about our
YouTube and Instagram.
YouTube. Oh, Instagram. We're on Instagram now. That's something new, and that's growing pretty rapidly. We're trying to do this whole social media digital thing. It seems like it's the best way we can get our message out to a lot of people. Because I feel we've got, with my experience, I think we've got that's the best solutions in the Mustang world for chassis and suspension. So yeah, this is the best way to do it. So please help us if you like what I'm saying. You're learning from it. And remember, we've got this is 28, I think, today. All of these are available. Reruns are available on YouTube, Kenny Brown TV. If you want to go back and see some, I don't know if they're cataloged by subject, but there's an awful lot of them.
They're in a folder called Cars and Coffee.
In a folder called Cars and Coffee. There we go.
And they can also look for tech tips.
And they can also look for tech tips. So there. See, I'm learning something today. Okay, I've got through everything in record time. Remind everybody that in 2 weeks there's going to be a workshop on SN95. And we'll talk about the front suspension, the rear suspension, the chassis, even some engine performance. Because we've had people ask about that, so we're just going to go ahead and do it. And Bridget is coming up with here.
Talk about the 5-day workshop.
Oh, yeah, we're also looking at, after I finish up with the Academy, doing another 5-day workshop on transforming your driving experience. We got a lot of positive feedback from that last time, so that'll be coming up sometime this fall / into winter. Right. And she's holding up more. She's doing a pretty good job being Carrie.
And they have to join the Speed Therapy Society group?
Oh, yeah, that happens to the Speed Therapy Society group. So if you want to join, that's a private Facebook group, Speed Therapy Society. Also, for non-Facebook people, we have ways that you can participate. You just have to let us know. We've got a number of people that just don't do Facebook, and we've got them hooked up through other means so they can access the information. And also in the Speed Therapy Society, there is a resource guide that a lot of things I talk about, we put in the resource guide so you can go back and look it up another time. So if we don't have any more questions,
Maybe ask if they have any more questions about the JLT cold cut.
yeah, any questions about cold air or IRS? Well, we've got a couple of minutes remaining. We might actually get done early today for a change. That me rattling on. So, okay, without any more questions, I guess we can wrap today up. So we will see you next week is going to be an Encore. And then in 2 weeks is going to be a workshop on SN95 / IRS cars. And even if you don't have an SN95 IRS, there's a lot of principles that are going to be talked about that you can apply to anything. And that's the whole thing. What I do is my solutions come from broader principles and how do you make things work. And it doesn't matter what kind of car it is. I mean, the same basic principles apply. So we will see you next week 10 o'clock, same place, same station. So until then, be sure to keep the shiny side up and enjoy this beautiful fallish type weather.